This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
Rules go out the window. I mean, there's no commitment to let's follow the rules. Let's keep everybody safe. Let's do what we need to do. What I have to do at the moment is important. What you have to do is less important. Therefore, I will take my approach over yours. So let me ask you this, Rev. Here we are. It's a political season in New York. Local elections are going to be taking place. Mayoral, controller, public advocate. We know you can't endorse, but could we meet? Could we have a meeting with you? Right? And we listen to that request, and then there's a thought process that goes through us. Talk about that for a moment.
Of course, the first thing we think about is a photo op, right? I'm not endorsing you, but if we do meet, depending upon where we meet, and if it's public, and if it gets out to the press, too often it's translated into an endorsement, if not by the candidate, him or herself, but by those in the media or by those who have, witnessed the photo. I've been in situations like that, so I'm very, very careful in terms of meeting with candidates, even having them come to, my house of worship, and that's a big deal in the community of color in terms of elected officials coming to the church, because that's still the largest people base in our community and a platform that they can reach so many.
Well, so people will say, well, what's wrong with you endorsing a candidate, Rev? There's someone who's running. You think that person is committed to values that are important for our community. Why can't you say this is the person we need to stand behind?
Well, first there's the legal issue, because as a religious organization, legally, we are not allowed to endorse a political candidate as a representative.
501c3.
We could lose our not-for-profit status. That's number one reason. Secondly, let me say that we can, as individual citizens, endorse a political candidate separate and apart from the organization, religious organization that we represent. So I appreciate, these guardrails because we influence a lot of people. But I think additionally, Rabbi, you and I know that there is no political candidate who lines up fully with our moral and ethical values.
Yeah.
And what do we say when we endorse a candidate and they don't line up in a very specific way that, it's pointed out to us? Then we're judged as hypocrites. I have personally, apart from my organization, I've personally endorsed political candidates from time to time. And, you take that chance. You risk the fact that they may do something that's inconsistent with your values and your moral and ethical standards. And then you have to explain it. What's your experience with it?
Very similar. My other thought is when there's a candidate who vehemently contradicts your value system, who, for example, will say things that you find borderline anti-Semitic or even crossing that line, I think you have a responsibility to speak out when it is an unfair attack. We went through October 7th, obviously, and we saw what people said and what people didn't say. And now we're finding that there are those who fault Israel for everything that's transpired but don't find any fault with the other side, and they're running for political office. Don't we have a responsibility to stand up for our people and say, this is wrong. This is just wrong. Let's talk. Let's give the facts here. So I think, we don't endorse, but we also, I think, have to stand against those who stand against us.
And it's not as though your community or my religious community are monolithic.
That's true.
They are divided. You have, and I've seen, and you and I have spoken about this. There are some Jews who are pro-Palestinian in this whole issue that's taking place in the Middle East concerning Hamas. And they're protesting American government or universities in our country for their support of Israel.
You know,
And, that's a reality.
yeah, and we've said, by the way, you can be pro-Palestinian, pro-Israeli. You can look at both sides and try to say, well, I agree with this, I don't agree with that. But when you only fault one side, when it's all Israel's fault all the time, and you don't see any fault on the other side, you're holding Israel to a different standard, then I think we have every right to question, are you anti-Semitic? And we have to speak out. You see, I know people coming to houses of worship very often say, we don't want to hear about politics. But they do want to hear clergy taking a stand when something that is so offensive is being said, and they don't want it left unaddressed. So I think I know we had Jeff Jacoby, the syndicated columnist, say, when I go to the synagogue, I don't want to hear politics. I get that. But there are people who do want to hear not politics, but principled positions when the politics are totally, they're inflammatory, they're attacking what you hold dear.
The reality is, Rabbi, that even if we don't care about politics, politics cares about us.
Yeah, yeah.
It's looking for our vote. It's
Yeah.
looking for our influence. It's trying to get into who we are and the quality of our life. So we can't just ignore politics.
I heard someone say to me recently, Rabbi, we will have politicians come and speak, in an informative gathering, but not during services, not on a Sabbath morning, because that is that's our sacred time.
And I understand and respect that, and it depends on your faith tradition. In the churches of color, primarily the black church experience, let's say in America, the Sunday service is more than just a sacred time of worship. It is gathering, it is fellowship, it is community, it is people coming together. And remember, it is in the context of the church during the time of slavery and Jim Crow in our country. It was the only place that we were free to hear, to learn, to grow. And the pastor would be expected to translate what's happening socially and politically in American society through the hearing of the congregation in ways that they can understand and make sense of it. And they were looking for the pastor's leadership. How do we respond to what's happening in our nation, especially when it comes to persons of color?
It's a very difficult position to be in. And when you're on that pulpit, there's a free pulpit, you can say whatever you want, but there still are boundaries even on a free pulpit. And you got to establish those boundaries. So, Rev, we're going to take a break at this time.
All right, so stay tuned for more of the Rev and the Rabbi right here on Red Apple Radio Networks.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
How should we respond to this? There's a case.
By the way, we Jews are good at questions because when very often you ask a person who's Jewish, how do you feel? The response is, how should I feel? You always get, a question answered by a question with a
Right,
number of
question. I
people.
get it.
Okay.
That's a smart move, though. That's
Yeah.
a smart move.
Go ahead.
But there is a church, Gateway Church. Robert Morris is the pastor there.
Hmm.
He is embroiled in a scandal of something that took place many years ago
Hmm.
that came back to haunt and bite him. Um, but the bigger question right now is not his guilt or innocence. He's facing, time in jail, evangelical
Mm.
church. But a question came up because a group of individuals who were former leaders within his church decided that with the scandal that he brought to the church, that he didn't live up to a promise to be the kind of leader that was necessary. Now, what happened was he was at some event, I think in Chicago. I could be wrong. I stand corrected, but he talked about the principle of giving and donating, and how God honors you when you're generous
Hmm.
and you're charitable. And this is what he said. He said to the audience, he said, "Look, I tell you what, try this for a year. And if it doesn't work the way I'm telling you it's going to work, that if you're generous and charitable, that you will be blessed as a result of it.
Mm.
I will give you your money back." He gave a money back guarantee. So now there's a class action lawsuit by four individuals in the church against him to get the money back that they gave, that they donated to this church for all the years that they were there. Rabbi, I want to know, how you feel about something like this,
You know what?
because something like that could set precedent for all of us.
He's guilty of false advertising.
Yeah.
Right? Let me say this. We have discussed in the past, is it called success theology?
Yeah, prosperity gospel. Yeah.
Prosperity
Hmm.
gospel, where you say to people, follow this path and you will see your mortgage will be paid, your children will be doctors and lawyers, whatever promises you make, right? And there's something very, very wrong. You do something because it's the right thing to do. God expects you to do it because these are the commandments. This is the path on which you should walk. Not because you don't do it for the sake of a reward. Jewish tradition teaches that. Don't do anything because you think you're going to be rewarded. Do it because you think this is what God expects of you. So when someone gives you that money back guarantee, I think that person is violating the precepts of faith. And frankly, from a legal standpoint, you could be held accountable. You said, I'm going to give you back your money. That's what you said. So it was wrong to offer. And I think...
So wait. Are
Yeah.
you saying that they should get their money back?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's
Yeah.
scary, Rabbi. That's scary.
Well, I
Do
think if you
you know how
because
many
people depended.
individuals
Yeah.
are going to say, "I don't like the way you guys have been handling this thing, so
Well,
we want our money back."
but look, it depends specifically what was promised. You got to be very, very careful with the words. I want to know what was said. But let's assume someone said, I can't afford to do this. It's going to hurt. I could lose my house if I'm delinquent on this payment. But minister said, I got to do it. I have to do it, and he's going to give me back the money. I think you can easily mislead people who are very, very could be weak at times, and I think there should be some accountability. So, what do you think? You think you just get
That's
it?
a scary. I don't know, because that's a scary notion. I'm just thinking about what that would mean if if it actually became policy or legislation, or,
Yeah,
mandatory. It just really makes the church a prey,
well,
to a situation like this.
but
That's
But
scary.
is it
Now
right to
let
make
me
that
throw.
offer? Is it
Well,
right to
well,
make an
that's the
offer, the money
question.
back? I'm going to give you back your money. Those who give to us,
That was wrong. That was
right,
dumb. That was
right,
ridiculous.
right.
I don't know if you'll call it a moment of apoplexy or what. It was dumb. But is it true that in your faith tradition, what we would call the Old Testament or the Hebrew
It does,
Scriptures,
right.
God does promise a return on investment when it comes to charitable giving. He offers promises to say, be generous, give, and see if if I quote a text here, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing that there won't be room enough to receive it. Those are the words of the prophet Malachi when it comes to supporting houses of worship,
But
the
what is
house
the
of God.
promise that Malachi is making? That there will be a place for you. There'll be a place for you if you live that good life, if you support others, you help others. There will be a place for you in the next world, right? You will have entry. You'll have an easy pass. That's not the same as saying, I'm going to give you back your mortgage payment.
But wait a minute. You say in the next world,
Yeah.
but the promise to the nation of Israel when it was established under the law of Moses was, I'll make you the lender and not the borrower. I place
Mm-hmm.
you above and not beneath. So God was saying, look, follow my commandments and I'll empower you
To be
in a
independent,
way that you can be independent
right?
and generous, right?
Right.
Hmm.
That's not a bad thing to say to people. I don't
Right.
think that's
I just
deceptive.
wouldn't give them. I wouldn't offer the money back
Yeah,
guarantee.
exactly.
Okay,
Yeah, I
that's where
think
you draw the line.
I just feel
I wouldn't
sometimes
make that guarantee in the first place. So
I think people are vulnerable sometimes, and they very much trust the person on the pulpit. And when you
sure,
make that
yeah,
kind of offer, and so I think some people can easily be, in their heads say, "Let me give this money because I know I'm not going to lose because the pastor or the rabbi will give it back to me." I think that's a dangerous path to follow.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly right. Interesting conversation
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
Rabbi.
But you
But
know what it also tells us? We have a statement in Jewish tradition: wise people, watch your words. Watch what you
mm,
say, right?
yeah,
Because being wise means being very careful in the things you say. And I find we've had this conversation, and we're going to have Congressman King on the program today. We'll be talking about people are very, very sloppy, with their words. They'll say whatever they want to say. They'll put it on media because they know there are no consequences to what they'll say. So
yeah,
right? Suppose I call you a name. Suppose I exaggerate. So what? What is,
yeah, yeah.
it won't cost me anything.
We've lost the importance of words, the value of words, and how important they are within society. Our
Let
words, yeah.
let me
Wow.
ask you this because we have just a few minutes left. Does character count anymore in any,
Oh,
do you, I'm just wondering, when we look at our leaders, because you wrote a book on leadership,
I sure did.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
Do you
yeah.
think people looking at leaders today say, I want something to get done, I don't care how it gets done, and character is not my first consideration in supporting this person?
Unfortunately, Rabbi, things like integrity, honesty, character, they seem to have gone out the
Mm,
window, especially when it comes to elected officials,
yeah.
people in positions of power and influence. In my book, I talk about the four qualities
Mm,
of a great leader:
right.
maturity, decisiveness, consistency, and strength. And part of that on maturity is character, being
Yeah.
responsible for your words, thoughts, motives, actions, and attitudes. So it's imperative, Rabbi.
Well, and our parents emphasized the importance of conduct. Remember on that report card, I've often said my mother looked at that first, and God help you. If you didn't get an A in conduct, nothing else was acceptable. All right, we're going to come back with a guest whom we've had many times and someone who's respected by people on both sides of the political aisle. I'm talking about Congressman Peter King. He really is America's congressman. I'm talking about Congressman Peter King. Thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, great to be with both of you, Reverend Rabbi. It's great to have you guys as friends, and it's always a privilege being with you. Just go easy on the questions. That's all.
Well,
Well,
I will.
careful.
Rev, I can't swear for, but I will.
Well, he does some swearing from time to time. I just want you to know that.
So, Congressman, I just want to tell you two things. Firstly, I had a conversation with former Fire Commissioner Sal Casano, and he said to me,
Wonderful guy.
"Yeah, well, he said the same about you." And he said, "Make sure you thank Congressman for the boundless assistance he helped give to many of us who were hurting at a difficult time following 9/11, the grants, the anti-terrorism funding that came through. And you were really there and deserve so much commendation for that. So I just want to say that it doesn't go unrecognized. Much appreciated.
Well, it means a lot to me. It means a lot that Sal is saying that. Also, it means a lot when I run into cops and firefighters who are getting the benefits of the 9/11 health legislation we got through. Because for a long time, we had to really fight hard for that. A lot of these guys from the South thought this was some kind of a New York gimmick. Meanwhile, you had firefighters and cops dying of these terrible illnesses and not being treated for them. That's all been taken care of, and it's going to be ongoing. So that's probably the thing that meant the most to me.
But we have to ask the question, Congressman, is that in jeopardy given the cuts that are being made in government and programs? Where does a program like that stand?
Yeah, when we passed it, and I guess the final bill was passed in 2019, it was all the actuaries, everyone told us that there was more than enough money to get to the end of the 21st century. But even with all the examinations that have gone on, they didn't realize how many more people were coming down with 9/11 illnesses. So now there's a good chance that the funding would run low within the next couple of years. So there is legislation, which the president has said, and the speaker has said, and Senator Schumer has said, will be passed to make sure that it goes forward, and that no cuts will be made in the current program. So everyone says that everything will be done the right way. But, Washington can be a strange place. So they have to say
what makes you say that,
really
Congressman? I can't understand why you take that position.
Well, I tell you, when you're down there, you realize, first of all, apart from all the uncertainty that prevails in any, I guess, Democratic group, I mean, that's with a small d, we have so many different views. It's even more so when it comes to New York because so many other parts of the country really resent us, and we don't always give maybe our best face to the rest of the country. And so we have to fight for everything. We have to fight for what we're entitled to. Others are fighting for what they think is extra.
It is amazing to me that anyone can get away with a kind of comment saying only Christians should be holding office. Here we are, 2025, and as I say, you can get away with it. You can get elected with that kind of mentality in certain places, and that is just disgraceful. And
We've moved away from a lot of that. A dear friend of mine for many, many years, he has his own carpet business, fabric business, and whenever we're doing things with the church, and we have a large church. You're talking about 96,000 square feet. And he's always provided the fabric that we've needed, carpeting that we've needed. And he's an Orthodox Jew. And we were talking about a project, and he was telling me, he said, Reverend, I had to deal with an issue with some cancer, and I had surgery, and I had one of the best doctors if you ever need someone. And he's a Muslim doctor, and he just performed the most incredible surgery. And here's an Orthodox Jew talking about how great his Muslim surgeon was, And that's the America that we live in, or should live in.
Yeah. It's sad that we raise the question, what religion are you? You talked about the firefighters before, first responders who risk their lives, give their lives, and don't ask, what religion are you before I save your life?
Yeah.
So it's just, Congressman, we're at a very unusual place in our history here where people express their opinions without substantiating the facts. You can say anything you want, and people accept it as being true. How do you deal with that today?
It's really difficult, and it's partly whether it's talk radio, whether it's the social media, whether it's just different propaganda groups putting out information or what they claim is information. I mean, take a situation like Ukraine, which is obviously complicated, and there can be strong arguments made on both sides, but there's so much factual misinformation that's out there. For instance, the president keeps saying we've given $350 billion to Ukraine. Well, actually, the total billion It's a total cost. It's $120 billion, and most of that is not in cash. It's in weapon systems, which is purchased here in the United States. So you have American workers that are being paid for it, and that's the bulk of the $120 billion. We also hear that Europe isn't putting in their share. Europe is putting more money than the United States because they realize what a threat that Russia is. Then also people say that more Ukrainian soldiers have been killed and they're losing the war, and that Russia is winning because there's so many more Ukrainians killed than Russians. In reality, there's almost twice as many Russian soldiers killed as Ukrainians. But the fact is that even though Russia is one of the largest militaries in the world, they are losing almost twice as many soldiers, either killed or wounded, than Ukraine. And to me, the worst or the best example of that is that Russia now has used North Korean soldiers. Here you have this incredibly powerful military force has been so decimated by the Ukrainians that they have to bring in North Koreans to fight in Ukraine, which is the world really turning upside down. I think we should defend Ukraine, not even because it's Ukraine, but because it will stop Russia. We have not had an invasion of an independent country in Europe since the end of World War II until now. And that was the advantage of the Marshall Plan, of the Truman Doctrine, of NATO. These are all bipartisan plans to preserve stability in Europe, not just for their sake, but for ours. We got dragged into two wars, World War I and World War II, because we had no influence in Europe. And to leave those countries to their own, we felt was too dangerous. So now, if we withdraw aid to Ukraine and Russia becomes successful in Ukraine, you're going to find countries like Germany rearming more than before, and we can end up with a situation where these countries are going at each other because we will no longer have the influence in Europe that we should have. So the world which we put together, imperfect as it was, for 80 years preserved stability in Europe, and also, except for the Korean War and Vietnam, which were limited to those countries, did not allow a conflagration to break out in Asia. So we should be very careful what we say, what we do, and if we are going to make changes in policy, we should know what we're talking about and what the implications are, rather than just saying all the Ukrainians are being killed and Russia is winning. If Russia was winning, they would not even be thinking about a ceasefire. But all they're talking about the ceasefire, by the way, so far, is Zelensky has agreed to 100% ceasefire. Russia has only agreed to a ceasefire involving energy infrastructure. One of the reasons for that is Ukraine has been very successful lately in attacking and destroying a lot of Russian infrastructure. So all I'm saying is these are key decisions that have to be made over the next year or two. Our relationship with Europe, our relationship with Asia, our relationship with Russia, our relationship with NATO, our relationship with China, and they're also defending Taiwan. If we're going to make changes in those in our policies we've had for decades, we should know what could be in store for us and have a full debate on it with honest facts and figures.
We're going to take a break right here and come back with more on the Rev the Rabbi and Congressman Peter King, America's congressman. We were taught, if you're going to argue on the merits. And unfortunately, there are those who drift away from that standard.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. We're in a world where commentary, pundits, opinions, personal opinions at that, are treated as facts instead of finding out what really happened or what was really said. And we turn those opinions into facts and truth. And then we run with it. And of course, we're also looking for someone to blame, which I'd like to discuss with Congressman. But first, let's talk about the facts. The fact that people don't want the facts.
Yeah, I think people feel very comfortable in their own silo, in their own echo chamber. And you can do that today. I mean, you can find a television or a radio station or a show which will repeat what you want to hear. They'll say it over and over again. And other guests aren't allowed to talk or aren't allowed on. And you go to MSNBC, you hear one thing, you go to Fox, you hear something else. You hear CNN, now you don't know what you're going to hear at CNN. But it's all over the place. And certainly different websites, and you go online, you can find almost anything. And when you read them, they make it sound like everybody in the world has this opinion, except a small handful. And it's dangerous. I think we're seeing it, by the way, to a large extent with Israel. I mean, the criticisms of Israel. Listen, you can always debate Middle East policy, but somehow this feeling the Jews are too powerful, they control the media, they control campaign funding and all that. It's dangerous.
We're controlling the media, Congressman. we Jews are doing a terrible job of it. But that
Those are all
I agree
myths,
with you.
Rabbi. You know that.
yeah,
Those
but
are all
I
myths.
remember it was Einstein who said, "My theory of relativity is a success. France will say I was the greatest Frenchman, and Britain will say I was the greatest Englishman. If it's a failure, everybody will say he was a Jew." So we get that when there's a fault out there. What bothers me, Congressman, is that those people who are casting blame upon the Jews don't look at any of the other problems of the world. You don't see them marching for what's happening in Syria to some of the minorities. Right. They don't march for what's happening in Iran. They don't march for what's happening in China. But it's all Israel all the time.
I'd like to say here. Go ahead, Congressman.
Oh, no, Reverend. I've been talking too much. You say.
Well, no, I like to say the fact that we do play a blame game. And like you just said, Rabbi, we don't take into consideration all of the factors that are involved in shaping what's happening. You take economics. I was looking back at the fact that China and the Asian nations have brought into the global, when they started participating more in the global economy, they brought more than 1 billion low-wage workers into the workforce, and it was in direct competition with American workers. But we'll blame the Republicans, we'll blame the Democrats, we'll blame our electeds, we'll blame systems and structures here in America. But there are realities that are beyond our context that are actually influencing and shaping our experience. True, Congressman?
Oh, you're right. There's no one wants to look behind a simple answer, a simple solution, or a simple scapegoat, or a simple cause, and it's dangerous. We have to, with there's more information available now than ever in the history of the world. I mean, it's there at a moment's notice. You can find out almost anything. In the past, you have to go to the library and spend hours trying to research it. Now it's all there, and yet with all of that, people seem to know less. They have many more facts and much less knowledge.
So, Congressman, I want to ask you a question. We had the threat of a government shutdown a short time ago, and Congressman Schumer said he wasn't going to vote with the Republicans to stop that. He did vote with the Republicans, and he was blamed. Now, is a government shutdown ever good for anyone?
No, and the ironic thing is it's terrible for the party which is believed to have caused the shutdown. In this case, it would have been the Democrats causing the shutdown. It would have blown up in their face. I've been on the other side of this. I've been with the Republicans when they did the stupid thing of calling for a shutdown, bringing about a shutdown. And when you're meeting with them, everyone they spoke to agreed with them. They were right. They realized that the rest of the country they weren't talking to was against it. So Schumer saw that. Chuck Schumer, he was basically saving the Democrats themselves. But because there was so much hatred of Trump among the Democratic Party, within the Democratic Party, that if Trump is supporting it, they have to be against it. And so they were willing to shut the government down to prove their point. I remember being there with Bill Clinton when Republicans couldn't stand Bill Clinton, and they wanted to shut the government down to show Clinton they were wrong. We shut down the government with Obama to show Obama was wrong. And all rational thought goes out until the shutdown goes on for a few weeks. People start complaining, mad, they're angry. And then you go back in and you reopen the government, and your situation is worse than when it started, both governmentally and politically. So, no, Chuck Schumer did the right thing for the country. He also, being a good politician, realized this was best for the Democratic Party. Unfortunately, the bases of both parties are not rational, and they do go all out. So right now you find the left wing of the Democratic Party talking about Chuck Schumer as if he were Donald Trump. And I saw the same thing among Republicans when we would end a shutdown or we would talk about keeping the government open. Our base would attack us. And the base that's one thing that's really changed in politics. People spoke about how bad the bosses were, the political organizations. But one thing political organizations did was sort of weed out some of the wackos. And also they provided a reasonable base to go forward. Now, I use the example in the Republican Party. What scared the life out of many Republicans was Eric Cantor, who was the majority leader of our party, as conservative as anyone ever was. I mean, he was a down-the-line conservative. He lost a primary to an unknown because they found some people on the right wing found some obscure amendments he had voted for in a committee some years before, and they made the whole campaign using a lot of money in media ads and mailings, saying that Eric Cantor wanted open borders. He was anti-American, and he ended up losing by about 10 points to a person that was unknown. That scared the life out of Republicans. Showed the power of the base. Then you found, and I'm not trying to start a whole feud here among Democrats, but when Joe Crowley, who could have been the next Speaker of the House, when he lost his election to an unknown person, AOC, it was the base of the party come out. There's certain rules in politics. I don't know how true they are, but they usually are pretty correct. In the primary, maybe 15 to 20% of voters come out. There's also another one that about 10% of each party is crazy. Well, that 10% is going to come out, and then you're fighting for the rest. So a small group of 5, 10, 12% can determine the candidate of the entire party, and it's dangerous.
Last question, Rev.
Yeah, Congressman, can you speak to the purge that's going on? Is there another time in history in our state, New York, where a newly elected official comes in, let's say governor, and does a radical removal of employees from the previous administration and replaces it with new employees? Is that common practice, or is this something totally new that we're seeing in our nation?
Well, it's not totally new. I mean, it was Andrew Jackson said, to the victor belongs the spoils. And I mean, it is traditional that you put people from your party in as much as possible, and to the extent others can be taken out, you try to do it. Certainly in any type of political job at all, anyone that's policy making, you bring in your own party as opposed to others. I think it's being done a little bit more now. But on the other hand, the government has become so bloated. So I mean, I think what the criticism of Trump here is being exaggerated, because we do have to cut down on employees. It could be done right now, maybe with too heavy a hand. I'll see that. But as far as rooting people out, I mean, I hate to say it, but that's been going on. I knew people that went out under the Clinton administration, the Bush administration, the Obama administration. They bring in their own, and I've certainly seen it here in local governments. Al D'Amato tells the story. He had a job in the Nassau County Attorney's Office in 1960, 61, because Democrats never elected anybody. Then they elected a county executive. When he came to work the next day, the locks on the door to his office had been changed. So it can be a tough business. I think they're doing it. And now let me just say, which Musk and the president are going to have to watch. When they start talking about excess employees and they're not needed, they're not on the job. They're not there to know who is excess and who's not. Just because a person was hired in the last year doesn't mean that he should automatically be removed. And you're going to see in situations like veterans hospitals where, maybe some people working there, and they're working because they're veterans. They're capable, and if maybe you can bring in some young genius to do a slightly better job. You really want to put a veteran out in the street. If he's doing a good job, maybe it's not the best job, but it's good enough. Or maybe he's doing a good job, but he just doesn't fit right in on the computer that they're talking about. So that is going to hurt Republicans if you find good people, especially, I would say, those who are veterans, those who could be disabled, because it can be pretty harsh. And I know if I were a cabinet secretary, if I were a department head, I wouldn't want some guy who's never worked in the government in his life, doesn't know what's going on in that job, just use a balance sheet to decide who's going to stay and who's going to go. There was a human element. It's almost like they're applying baseball analytics to government. I'd rather go with the baseball manager who knows in his gut who the better player is, not relying on what some computer tells him.
All right.
Yeah, and I let me just say this. I already appreciated that about you, even when you were not former congressman, but you were in office. You would take your own party to task when there were questions about, methodologies. I really respect that and appreciate that about you. Congressman Peter King.
I would just add to that, Rev. One of the great heroes of Peter King was former late Senator Joe Lieberman.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and we would often talk about him with such reverence for the kind of person he was. But I got to tell you, Lieberman would talk about Peter King the same way. And I think, Congressman, he's looking down and saying, thank God there's a Peter King who can look at an issue fairly without being so partisan, with looking for, facts rather than fiction to argue. We're very fortunate to have you. Thank you.
Well, I always look up to Joe Lieberman as being a true hero, an American hero.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to prove that somehow he was Irish, but I don't think he was.
And I remind you, he was a member of my people, but he saw America as our people.
Absolutely. He was the best.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. Great conversation, Rabbi.
Excellent conversation, a candid conversation. People able to talk to each other without shouting at each other, without limiting the speech of the other and listening to the other. That's what we need. More of that.